something about Americans and rebellion. The urge to say no to the status quo and do something different. The desire to redefine trends and reinvent the wheel. You know how they say, don't fix it if it ain't broken? Well, Americans will break it just so they can fix it. It started with the rebellion against the British in 1775, continued with the rebellion against prohibition in 1933, and culminated in the rebellion against gravity in 1961. Let's face it, almost every outstanding achievement of the American people was fueled by the spirit of rebellion, and it was this very spirit that inspired the story of one of the fastest, riskiest, and most relentless cars America ever built. This is the story of a car that rebelled against boring, boxy, and bummy cars. The story of a car that reeked of raw power, sleek design, and unbridled performance. A story of how automotive excellence met unrivaled passion. This is the story of a car that took the automotive world by storm and became a true American legend. This is the story of the Dodge Viper. The year was 1988, and Chrysler was in trouble. Again, a few years back, the car company, which was one of the big three in the US, the smallest of the three, but a part of them nonetheless, was nearing bankruptcy and had to be bailed out by the US government. Lee Iacocca, the legendary auto exec from Ford, had to be brought in to steady the ship and save the company from imploding under its financial crisis. So, Lee went into overdrive, cutting costs and closing down departments that weren't making money. It was almost during this time that he brought up the idea of using a single platform to build different car models, an idea that was so brilliant that it is still in use today. This resulted in the production of the K cars that kind of gave Chrysler and its subsidiaries a lifeline because they sold very well, but all of these happened around 1978 and the early 80s. By 1988, Chrysler was already in the red again. Pretty worrisome, right? Well, the company would get into another series of financial troubles again by 2008, but that's a story for another day. Wait, come to think of it, Chrysler seems to have an issue with the number 8. How come its financial issues came in 1978, 1988, and 2008? And at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy nutjob, there are 8 letters in Chrysler, and you know what? Well, we will just stop at this point. Anyway, by 1988, the company and its subsidiaries, one of which was Dodge, had started to trail in sales behind Ford and Chevrolet, and trouble seemed to be lurking around the corner. Lee Iacocca was still the president, but it seemed like he was at his wit's end at this point. I guess there was a limit to how much you can save a child that's bent on getting into financial trouble every time. While Lee Iacocca seemed to be lost for a solution, his senior vice president, Bob Lutz, was not. See, like Iacocca, Bob Lutz also had some serious experience with making fast and outstanding cars. He was a Marine pilot who loved the smell of burning rubber and gasoline, and also had the ultimate goal of building a true driver's car. Guess who shared an almost similar trajectory in life? Carroll Shelby, who coincidentally inspired Bob Lutz and had a hand in the making of the historic cars we are discussing. In fact, Bob's personal car was a replica of the Shelby Cobra 427, which also played an important role in this story. When Lutz left the military, he went straight into the auto industry, where he worked as an exec. He started at BMW, where he helped build one of the more iconic cars to ever come out of Germany, the BMW M Series. After his stint at BMW, he came back to the States, where he worked for Ford and helped build the Mk3 Escort. Again, another fast car. So by the time he joined Lee Iacocca as the senior vice president at Chrysler, there was no doubt that he knew a lot about making fast cars. And in the money mess that the company found itself in '88, he believed that fast cars could save the day. So he got to work. One bright morning, he tore off the Ford badge on a Shelby Cobra replica and drove it to work. Upon getting to work, he showed it to one of the lead designers at Chrysler at the time, Tom Gale. Gale was inspired by the car and got to work, creating a clay prototype that mimicked the design of the Shelby 427. As the clay prototype began to take shape, it was clear that this would be something great. He reached out to Lutz, showed him his design, and Bob Lutz was like, "Let's do it." They decided to make the prototype into something real, so Lutz and Gale created Team Viper, poaching talents from different departments in the company. They got Francois Castaigne, an engineer whose first job was building engines for the 24 Hours of Le Mans race. There was also Dick Winkles.
Oh my God, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
Don't you dare laugh at that name, who was working on Lamborghini at the time, and Roy Sjoberg, who also worked with the man that was the brain behind the Corvette. It was Sjoberg who created an extensive team of engineers and mechanics who would work on the project. All of the 21 mechanics and engineers had to have some form of racing experience and must adhere to the rules, which are as follows. 1. The budget was $50 million, and there should be no reason to exceed it. Yep, Chrysler was broke, remember? 2. They had a 3-year production window, and lastly, they must be secretive and avoid getting Lutz into trouble, as he sanctioned the project without Lee Iacocca's approval or any of the other stiff suits in Chrysler. The team got to work, and by 1989, they had a running prototype that could be unveiled. But they could not just unveil it without Iacocca's approval, so once again, Lutz got to work. He went to Lee's office to pitch the idea of building the new car for real, and with him, he took the ultimate weapon. A weapon that Lee Iacocca had a long history with and had never been able to say no to. He went with Carroll Shelby. Like how you go to your mom to help you beg your dad when you messed up? Exactly. Carroll Shelby, who was 66 years old at the time, knew a fast car when he saw one. He had driven and built many fast cars himself. It was Shelby who convinced Lee Iacocca to at least let the team unveil the project at the Detroit International Auto Show in '89. And Iacocca agreed. We told you he'd never say no to Shelby. We wonder how his wife feels about that, though. By the time the prototype rolled out onto the stage at the auto show, all the resistance and doubts that Lee Iacocca had against the production of the car had already gone. The response of the media and the auto world to the car was electric. People had been starved of sleek, fast, and high-performance cars for a long time. They were used to boxy and boring cars. People started clamoring for the car, and down payments were getting mailed to Chrysler. Rumors had it that some celebrities and car enthusiasts sent blank checks to Iacocca just so they could be the first on the waiting list for the car when it goes into production. It was that serious. Iacocca had no choice but to approve the production of the car, now known as the Dodge Viper. The name came from Italy and was inspired by the Shelby Cobra, the same car that inspired its design. Tom Gale was having dinner with the head of Italdesign when the topic of cars came up, and they ended up talking about the Cobra. Gale was asked what the Italian name for a snake was and had gotten the response, Vipera. This was how the car got its name, but the name was not the only thing about the Viper that came from Italy. The engine that powered the beast also came from Italy. At the time, Chrysler owned Lamborghini. Yeah, this is another complicated, wild story for another day. So the leadership at Chrysler talked to the boys at Lamborghini to build a powerful engine that was worthy of the Viper's height. The Italian boys took a V10 engine from a truck and fine-tuned it into something powerful and lightweight enough to fit into the boot of the Viper. This was how the lightweight and super-fast Dodge Viper was built. The car's purpose was to move fast, and it did just that. The car omitted any features or functionality that did not add to its speed. It had no roof, no windows, no power locks, no anti-lock brakes, and no air conditioning. Hell, it did not even have any door handles. The only traction controls in the car were your 2 feet in the car. It was a race car through and through with no exceptions. It was debuted in 1991 as a pace car for the Indy 500 race, where it was driven by Carroll Shelby himself, the man who helped push its production over the line. The first generation, named the SR1, was fast. It delivered 400 horsepower and 450 foot-pounds of torque. With this amount of speed behind it, the car could literally fly. It made the 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds and clocked the quarter-mile mark in 13 seconds. Its top speed was 160 miles per hour. The SR1 was offered from 1991 to 1995 with minimal changes to it. Eventually, the team at Chrysler decided that they wanted to try to best themselves with a new version of the Viper. The second generation was launched in 1996 and was referred to by its code name SR2. This new Viper featured some redesigns and updates throughout its 6-year run. Since it was a Viper, it also gained more power. The initial model offered in 1996 still came with the potentially dangerous side exhaust pipes, but by the middle of the year, they were gone. They were replaced with a single muffler at the rear of the vehicle. Since the muffler exited via the two central tailpipes, the car's back pressure was reduced, leading to an increase in horsepower. This mid-year model went up to 410 horsepower and had 488 foot-pounds of torque. At the end of 1996, a new Viper GTS Coupe arrived with even more power than the first generation. The GTS featured 450 horsepower and 490 foot-pounds of torque. With all this power backing it up, the car's top speed was 180 miles per hour, and it can go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in close to 4.5 seconds. In addition to the GTS's incredible power, it also came with some niceties not found in the first gen. When first released, the GTS came with power glass side windows, exterior door handles, airbags, and air conditioning. Buyers didn't have any choice in transmission, as Dodge only offered a 6-speed manual transmission. In 2003, Dodge released an all-new Viper SRT10, marking the start of the third generation. To separate this generation of the Viper from the previous two, the Viper team significantly restyled the SRT10. It featured much more angled bodywork, giving it a sharper appearance. The team also dropped the chassis weight and increased its rigidity. Initially, Dodge only offered the SRT10 in a two-door convertible style, and it only came with a 6-speed Tremec T56 manual transmission. The restyled Dodge Viper's appearance matched its incredible power. The previous 8-liter engine was replaced by an 8.3-liter engine. The SRT10's upgraded engine came with 500 horsepower and 525 foot-pounds of torque. Even with the increased power, the engineering team at Dodge was able to significantly reduce the weight of the engine. With all these changes, it went from 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds and completed the quarter mile in under 12 seconds. It also reached a top speed of 190 miles per hour. In 2008, the fourth gen of the Dodge Viper arrived. This new generation was named the ZB2, and the new generation meant a new and improved engine. The Dodge team changed from the previous generation's 8.3-liter engine to an 8.4-liter V10 engine. This new engine offered 600 horsepower and 560 foot-pounds of torque. The SRT10 reached a top speed of 202 miles per hour with a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of 3.5 seconds. In tests, the Dodge Viper could hit the quarter mile in just 11.6 seconds. The 5th-gen Dodge Viper arrived in 2013, featuring greater power and the return of the GTS. Buyers could choose between the GTS or the SRT Viper. Of course, there were some differences between the two models, with one of the most notable being the SRT featuring 2 functional vents on the hood and the GTS featuring 6 of them. This Viper continued the trend of providing greater power to every generation. The 8.4-liter V10 engine on both models generated up to 640 horsepower and 600 foot-pounds of torque. In 2015, Dodge upgraded the engine to 645 horsepower. On the track, the Viper could hit a top speed of 206 miles per hour and go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in only 3.5 seconds. 5th-gen Vipers came with a 6-speed Tremec TR6060 manual transmission. Unfortunately, this was the last generation of America's fastest cars. In 2013, the sales began to drop, and Chrysler had no other option but to cut the production numbers and finally stop making the car by 2017. Nonetheless, the Dodge Viper came and served its purpose. It revived the American spirit of rebellion, fought the menace of boring cars to a standstill, and helped keep the lights on at Chrysler at a time when the company was almost dying.